That's right. Good evening. This is Gareth Roberts talking to you from Llanfairpwll, Anglesey. I'm the Secretary of Wales for Europe and the Chair of North Wales for Europe. And we've got a special meeting tonight. It's a pretty select meeting from the number of people here, but we're delighted to give a welcome to the UK Music CEO, Tom. And this is part of the Face the Music campaign with the European Movement UK, because we want to expose the impact of Brexit on the music industry in Wales and the UK. And we are keen to hear more insight from people who are at the forefront of organisations like UK Music. Music is very important as an industry and culturally in Wales. Cardiff has become a major venue for pop groups and so on. I mean, here in North Wales, we go to Manchester very often, but nevertheless, music is a very important industry and it has been penalised as a result of Brexit. So this is why we've invited Tom Kiehl, the CEO of UK Music, to talk to us, give us an insight on the effects of Brexit and what you would like the UK government to do. Thank you very much, Tom.
Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you, Gareth, for inviting me to talk to you today about these important topics. There's many facets to Brexit and its impact on the creative industry, wider creative industries, but also music industry in particular. And hopefully by talking to you today about some of those impacts and what we're trying to do as an organisation, that will be helpful in explaining that. I'm going to do a little bit of slides, and conscious that maybe some people might not know exactly who UK Music are and how we kind of sit with the music industry. So if that's all right to do a little bit of that, just so people can see where we're coming at it from and what our kind of vantage point is, and then I'll talk in a little bit more detail on the Brexit impact. So I'll start to share my screen now, and again, very happy to do questions afterwards as well, and talking more detail about some of this work. So a lot of the work we do obviously relies on people working with us and campaigning through people like European Movement and organisations like that, and they're really important to our work. So we can't get by without having that kind of support, I would say. But just a brief introduction: UK Music is a collective organisation. We represent 10 member organisations, ranging from the various facets of the music industry. Just going through. Sorry, just trying to scroll. Yeah. So here we are. We're basically a trade body of trade bodies. We bring together. We're there to campaign, to champion the music industry, and collaborate on a number of issues, and that ranges from things like music education. It ranges from things like the impact of artificial intelligence on things like copyright, and also it ranges on in terms of managing the impacts of Brexit. Our member organisations range from record company organisations, so music record companies, BPI represent major record companies, AIM represent independents, music publishers represent the Music Publishers Association, and they're also creator organisations such as the Musicians Union, the Music Managers Forum, the Music Producers Guild, the Featured Artists Coalition, the Ivors Academy, and then the two collecting societies who deal with royalties on behalf of the music industry, PPL and PRS. So those 10 member organisations came together about 17, 18 years ago, to recognising in particular a kind of policy government level that there were things that we wanted to achieve both at Westminster and Whitehall, but also in devolved administrations as well, and in local authorities, that recognising that we're more powerful collectively together as an industry than we are by kind of campaigning for things separately. So that's our where we come from. The music industry as a whole is worth 7.6 billion to the economy, and in the UK that is. I don't have a regional specific figure for Wales, unfortunately, because we can't quite break it out in terms of that point. But Wales obviously contributes greatly to our music industry, as Gareth's already highlighted, both in terms of the venues and the rich from grassroots to stadiums, but also in Cardiff and elsewhere, but also in terms of the rich history of music across Wales and across a number of genres, and they all greatly contribute to that 7.6 billion figure. It's also worth 4.6 billion in terms of exports, and we employ over 216,000 people within the UK music industry. We also report on things like music tourism, which is the impact of what UK does in terms of people coming from overseas to go to concerts and festivals, and that generates a lot of money. But also people who travel around across the country for concerts and gigs and festivals. They're really important drivers of economic value to the sector. So policy from us ranges from a number of things, a number of initiatives. We act as many ways a conduit for the music industry and politicians. We run something called the All-Party Parliamentary Group, which I'll come on to further, and then running campaigns on things like AI and planning laws. And I know that in Cardiff a couple of years ago, there was an issue on Womanby Street and the venue closures in Cardiff, and that was something we were very much involved in, and trying to make sure that some of the threats to developments within this kind of city centre of Cardiff didn't have a negative impact on nighttime economy and other aspects. We did a manifesto for the last election, which I highlighted 10 kind of policy themes, and the easing restrictions around EU touring were one of them. And also around the manifesto, we had great success in terms of getting that into the various political party manifestos. One of them being, of course, the Labour manifesto, and they having a very concrete pledge to look at this issue in more detail. And so we are optimistic about easing challenges around touring in particular through the event of leaving the European Union will have a positive impact. We also run the All-Party Parliamentary Group in Westminster, which I referenced to. We did a report a few years ago on the impact of Brexit and on the music industry, which I would refer people to as well. Maybe that could be circulated to everybody after my talk as well, because that might give a greater, more granular insight into some of the challenges that we're facing too. We did basically a big inquiry, invited a lot of evidence in that immediate aftermath after we left from the European Union, and brought in people from across the sector to actually give us some insights, and we made a number of recommendations to Parliament as a result of that inquiry, which we ran with the All Parliamentary Group. I might come off. That's just a kind of quick overview of some of our activities. But I might stop sharing and then come back to sharing a little bit further for some of the other slides I had to show, because I obviously want to put this in context about why it's so important. I mean, Europe is the biggest music market for the UK music industry. People want to break America, but it's our closest market. It's one of our most strategically important markets as well, and that's for all aspects of the sector. So leaving the European Union did obviously a lot of damage and has acted in many ways as a catastrophe for the sector, for the music industry. And it is really that, fundamentally, it's that loss of freedom of movement, and which has caused a number of challenges for us as an industry. Because before, when we were part of the European Union, you could still have that issue where you could do a gig or a concert in Amsterdam one night and then Berlin the next, and without being able to move and between country to country in such a way. Touring just has that spontaneity to it, and also we lost a lot of that through that. Leading up to the agreement of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, we actually raised awareness, and we did quite a lot of high-profile work in order to highlight our fears and concerns. But ultimately, we were very disappointed by the lack, if no any reference to our concerns within the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. So I'd say, in terms of particularly around freedom of movement, of course, the issue is fundamentally one of having 26, 27 different countries that we now have to navigate. And this is particularly challenging to the small up and coming artists. Of course, the larger artists, the bigger artists, are able to put more resource into this. They're able to navigate these challenges. But at the end of the day, that it's the smaller, more up and coming artists who would have previously been able to go over to Europe with ease, which are simply not now going out and performing. So that presents a huge challenge for us as a sector, and it's something that we're very keen to rectify, and have been, as I said, with a lot of our campaigning work within Parliament and elsewhere. And I gave evidence to the at the Senate as well last year on this very topic as part of the inquiry that they did into this area. So it's something we're keen to make progress on. But if we can get some kind of work around, particularly around what's called a visa waiver agreement, that's something which would greatly help us as a sector. Or again around work permits and permissions there. I mean, one of the things we really had to deal with in the early days in that kind of 2022, 2023, because obviously the impact of Brexit came along at the same time as COVID, and actually it kind of was a bit of COVID was a masked actually some of these challenges. If we didn't have COVID, you would have literally had a cliff edge, and I think that in some ways that has not helped us. I think in terms of articulating it, because the music industry wasn't able to work and operate at that time. In any case, regardless of Brexit, but if you did have that Brexit kind of cliff edge with touring, I think a more dramatic moment would have occurred, which I think would have been more quite pronounced, and people would have been really aware, I think, of that the damage. I mean, essentially, we did have a no deal Brexit, I think, for the music industry, and particularly in touring, and that phrase was branded around a lot in the run up to leaving the EU. But I think in reality, that probably was the situation for us as a music industry. I would say that also one of the issues we had is the sheer complexity of having to navigate 27 different restrictions. I mean, certain areas, certain countries probably do have more liberal policies than others, but obviously, as we're seeing at the moment with a shifting move towards borders and immigration controls too, that's not it's something we're having to always kind of keep on top of as well, in terms of the different schemes and systems that countries have around entry requirements. So that is a kind of like the fundamental issue, is that musicians and their crew are finding it increasingly very challenging to tour. Previously, it was very spontaneous, the nature of it, and now they can no longer do that. And the live music industry and performance is incredibly important, and particularly in a situation where recorded music maybe doesn't have the same returns for all artists as it maybe has done historically. Live music is an incredibly important revenue stream for the music industry, and for artists and musicians in particular. But also it kind of does go beyond it's not just a pure touring issue. Composers as well are used to going and collaborating with people across Europe, and particular kind of pockets across Europe where you have certain artists who maybe have certain genres in other countries. So, for example, Scandinavia, there's a lot of composers, high profile composers, who are actually Scandinavian based, and so again, even just going out there and collaborating and writing songs together, and that kind of form of cultural collaboration, which the music industry does thrive on, is not happening in the way that it maybe did previously. The other kind of big challenge is around movement of goods and the carnet requirements. This essentially means that because there's a lot of equipment associated with touring, that musicians and their crew have to have certifications to essentially mean that they're not going to be selling on or dumping goods within a particular country. And so that requires added red tape and bureaucracy that's required through things like the carnet system, where people have to have bands and artists. Again, it's the small and up and coming artists who find that a great challenge to actually then have that processes and procedures, so that essentially making sure that it's known what people are going in and out of a country with, and make sure they're not illegally dumping stuff. So that's or selling on. So that again, it's added extra complexity. It's added extra requirements, which are hugely problematic for the sector. Another issue is around what is called the cabotage requirements, and this is to do with, in particular for music industry, big trucks and the big trucks at scale. There are cabotage rules that exist in terms of the number of stops that a freight, basically freight transport, can do from leaving the UK and then stopping in other countries, and the limitations on that. And in particular, that's a big challenge for orchestras because often that they own their own vehicles, and they can't essentially do a workaround with or at least they can, but with huge cost associated with a workaround with effectively an EU touring company instead, or a freight touring company. So again, that's another issue where we've been trying to work with successive governments to get clarity on that area. Things like merchandise as well. Again, that has requirements around it. CITES, which is to do with the protection of musical instruments and from endangered species, and the fact that certain musical instruments are made up of protected goods. And again, like the fact that you have to certify each time you're leaving a country and into the European Union area, essentially the process behind that. So a lot of complexities, a lot of confusion. People are simply not touring in the way that they were, and so that's going to have a profound challenge for us as a music industry, because ultimately touring gives people that chance to young musicians, gives them that chance to really hone their craft and develop their fan bases, but it also it gives drives audiences, and a band, an artist, or a performer may be successful in one particular country, but they may not be in another. And the beauty of the previous situation is that you had that further expanse and were able to do that and develop your fan bases in such a way. So it's cute, it created a huge challenge in that sense, and it's kind of quite paradoxical in many ways because we're a parliamentary, political focused organisation. And we've seen people. We've worked with Conservative and other people in other parties as well who voted Brexit, who very much, but they actually were very key supporters of the music industry. I don't think anybody voted to leave in order to actually make sure that the music industry would suffer. So we definitely are kind of collateral damage, I think, in a lot of this, and the kind of approach that was taken, and the so-called kind of sunny uplands of trade deals have not, which was the kind of the other side of the coin, which was sold at the time. That's never really led to fruition, and it's certainly no replacement for the essentially what we had before. And so I want to go back a little bit to some of the slides too, and some further slides that I had, just to kind of update you on a couple of other things. So is that clear for everybody? Can everyone see that? Which is essentially some statistics. We've run a survey for a couple of years, which is all essentially to do with funding and what people money and within the music industry. And I think the key, obviously, there's quite a lot of figures there to digest, but I think the key, and basically, it's our annual creator survey. Within that, we've asked some specific questions about the impact of Brexit on creator and earnings and their impact there. And we've done it for a couple of years now. And I think the key point there, I think, is that 82 or 87% say that their earnings have decreased since leaving the European Union. I mean, that's a fundamental huge problem for us. I mean, the fact that actually 13 and 18% of people actually said that in 6 that they've actually increased is somewhat surprising. In some ways, I would expect that to be somewhat even smaller. But I think those people are the huge amount of problems that people have had. At the end of the day, musicians are people that they're not on particularly high incomes. It's very sporadic work and can fluctuate quite greatly. And the fact that we've kind of cut off a key market in such a way can only cause damage to us. visas and work permits costs, transport costs, again, ranging production costs, all these kind of additional costs that have added to a lot of the challenges that we face. Um, but finally, I just wanted to report on an initiative that we have done actually this afternoon. Well, we reported on it today, but it's something we've been working on for the past month. So we work collaboratively with a number of organisations across the music industry. And so at the top there, this is basically a letter that we have sent to the European Council, to the President of the European Commission, and to our Prime Minister, um, essentially to do with the reset talks and the summit that's taking place next week, because we see that as an opportunity. Of course, that's going to be focused on safety and security and those types of issues, but we feel that it's really important that this opportunity for a cultural dialogue to get those issues back on the table. As I said, the government has been elected on a manifesto commitment to sort out some of these issues. I think there's three issues in particular where the manifesto from the Labour Party was clear. One of them was issue, the other one I think was veterinary services, and another one I think around skills. I think, and so the fact that the UK government has identified this as an issue which it wants to sort out and tackle is obviously very welcome for us as an organisation. But we were compelled to send this letter, and we've got over 500 people signed up from both the UK music industry, but also the EU music industry, because it does take two to tango with these sort of things. We do, to get a deal, we also have to demonstrate it's in the interests of our counterparts in the European Union to work with us to actually afford a new cultural accord. And I think I used the phrase cultural accord, and I think that's probably ultimately what we're looking at. I think in many issues to do with the creative sector, what was contained within the trade and cooperation agreement was very limited to nothing, which could really help support our sector. And so we do need a new cultural relationship. There is a scheme called Creative Europe, a funding scheme, which also again does lots of projects and very good projects within the for music industry and other sectors within the creative industries. And by leaving the European Union, we've also left that funding scheme too. So I think there's an opportunity, I think, with the reset talks next week to put some of this back on the agenda. We're not expecting a new deal to come out of this. We think that it will be that's probably not likely in terms of next week's talks, but at least if there could be some kind of commitment to further discussions in these areas, and actually make sure that we get this on their agenda, that's important. In addition to the work we're doing in this area, I also sit on something called the Domestic Advisory Group, and that's something which brings together sectors within across business and civil society from the EU and the UK. Is backed up by the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and it is meant to forge greater links and actually make sure that we are highlighting problems and deficiencies within the Trade and Cooperation Agreement in that respect. There are actually very few of us from the cultural sector within that grouping, so we are a small voice, but we are, in the statements that come out of that domestic advisory group, they are getting heard, and there is a parallel parliamentary grouping which I think is also doing some similar work. So the kind of picture I'm trying to present to you, I think, is one of great challenge, great regret and disappointment about the outcome of Brexit, but one where the sector, as I said, we're a very broad church, my organisation, and that means that probably there are some issues which are quite difficult for us to align on. But I would say that this is probably the one, if not the most cohesive policy where we can get all the sector coming together, just recognising the importance there. There may be issues about streaming and rates and things like that within our membership, but in terms of actually wanting to forge a greater link and a cultural agreement and actually make sure we get away from some of the harm from Brexit, this is very much a unifier for us as both an organisation, but also as a sector and industry at large. So we hope we released that letter this afternoon. I was particularly keen because I knew I was speaking to you. I was particularly keen that we did get it out today as well because I wanted to come to you and speak to something about positive that we're doing in this space too. So, I'm happy to have a bit of a chat and any questions that any of you have about this work, and if there's anything you want me to elaborate on further, I can try and do my best on that.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for your honesty, because it's not popular to mention the word Brexit and to say something nasty about it. Thank you for a very detailed analysis and an honest analysis, and we appreciate that. As you know, EM have asked the government to consider about 10 different things within the reset, and Creative Europe is one of them. And we certainly in Wales have always been interested in culture, but also the economic effects of music. What kind of reception did you get in the Senedd and when you talked about your problems?
I thought, yeah, I think it was a cross-party grouping, and I felt that there was a genuine willingness to understand more about a lot of the challenges. So I was pleasantly surprised about how sort of engaged and wanting to actually make sure that the voice from Wales, I think, was clear in these discussions too. And I think particularly me coming from somebody not from Wales, and that I got a real sense of of concern, but also being constructive, I think, in terms of actually where wanting to find solutions, I think. And yeah.
Thank you very much. We have got a couple of hands up. I think it's Jonathan first and then followed by Caroline. Would you both like to unmute, please? And then Jonathan, will you ask your question?
Yes, well, thank you very much for that very clear presentation. As you will no doubt know, we have the Senedd elections next year, and Nigel Farage and Reform have indicated they're really going to kind of prioritise those elections. So it's really kind of important that we can really be as well as kind of our kind of lobbying is as well informed as possible. I mean, I was very struck by the kind of economic impacts of Brexit on the kind of music industry. And whilst I appreciate that it is actually, quite difficult to disaggregate those figures for Wales, I just wondered if the piece of work could be done or perhaps commissioned prior to those elections, because manifestos in the parties are currently being being drafted as we speak.
Yes. No. I think definitely. I mean, I can take that away and see if there's something more granular, specific on Wales that we can provide, both either on the economy, the economic value of the sector as a whole, or more specifically on some of the kind of Brexit related impacts. And I'm definitely can do that and see with colleagues what might be possible. I would say another kind of aspect to it is, yes, we are aware of the. I mean, so we're UK music. We're based in London, but we do very much see ourselves as UK music, and we do want to engage very closely with the Senedd elections as well. And we are formulating some early thoughts about manifestos. But it's really helpful to know that you're saying that the process of writing is already underway, and we've got to maybe speed that up a little bit, because we don't want to kind of be caught short on that as well. I think I do have some calls, I think, lined up next week, in fact, with a couple of party people from various parties, I think, within Wales in this area. And obviously this will be something which I'll be talking to them about. But yeah, if there's a need for us to fast track some of that work, I'm happy to do that too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Caroline, os gen ti gwestiwn i ofyn?
Yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn, Gareth. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight, Tom. That was really useful, and some really useful facts and figures in your slides as well. It'd be really useful if those could be shared with some of us. And I agree with Jonathan's question as well. It's difficult to extract Wales data on a number of things in relation to Brexit, and that would really help us make the case here. I had a phone call from Mick Antoniou this morning, so this is news to some of the directors in this meeting as well. We've set up a Senedd cross-party working group on Europe a few months ago, and Mick Antoniou is the Senedd member who chairs that. And we've got a meeting. So next week is crucial because we've got the opening of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement talks on the Monday. Tuesday is the second meeting of the Senedd cross-party group. And on Wednesday, Mick has secured a short debate, and he's chosen to speak on Wales and Europe, dismantling the barriers. And we were talking this morning about what he should focus on to make it timely and really pertinent to Wales. And we agreed that he would focus on very much this area. So better deal, using some of the headings from the European Movement 10 priorities, better deal for musicians and touring artists, rejoining Creative Europe, a youth opportunity scheme, rejoining Erasmus for students as well, and removing red tape for professionals. So all of those, I think, would focus on the people element and free movement and the ability of people to travel, to study, but to earn a living as well. So anything you've got that might help us with a briefing for Mick would be really, really useful. The other thing we did in January, to mark the 5 years since the UK left the EU, we held a conference, and it was attended by about 120 people altogether. We had some really good speakers. And we did have an hour in the afternoon on looking at the impact of Brexit on culture, languages and creative industries. And three of the speakers represented this sector in Wales. So we had Professor Elin Hargreaves-Jones, who is the director for the one of the academic institutions we have in Wales. We had Elined Harf, who works for Wales International, which is part of the Arts Council. And we had Ruth Cox, who is the director of the British Council in Wales. So, and the three of them were very passionate, and some of them have spoken out since then as well in support of the creative industries, including musicians and performers. So what you've had to say today is very, very, very relevant to us in Wales. And we're very keen to make sure that is covered in the Senedd next week as well.
Brilliant. That's helpful. I'm also one thing that since the new government has been set up in the UK, they've set up something called a Soft Power Council, which I sit on, and it's sort of looking at the whole idea of soft power and cultural diplomacy, and why things like music and football and art and those sort of things, how they can help the UK's influence. I mean, it's quite, at the moment, I guess it's quite amorphous and a bit unclear what it is, but just why this is relevant to that discussion. I think the last meeting of that was in Wales about a fortnight ago, which I went to at the Principality Stadium, and Mick was there as part of that meeting, which was very useful, and we heard a lot of insights from people across the kind of cultural sectors from Wales, and I think there's definitely a lot of alignment. I think that we can do. I think together on this, just from hearing from them. And again, Ruth was at that meeting as well, and Ruth also, she was the session I did at the Senedd last year. Ruth also gave evidence too. So I think these bodies like British Council and UK Music and the kind of networks we have, I think are really important. I think as we try to find a path in these kind of to make progress, essentially, I guess, in a lot of these issues. And yeah, if there's more work that we can be done, and I think if there's particularly like the debates that you're referring to, I think we can help and give some support in that respect too.
Thank you very much.
What kind of support do you think that EM and Wales for Europe can give you?
I guess you. I think that you can certainly support the message, getting the message out there. I think both in terms of contacting MPs and local councillors and kind of elected people. I think making them aware of these issues. I mean, to some of them it's been more directly relevant, but I just think the thing is that everyone's plugged into all kind of, particularly in politics, political networks and things. And I think the more that we can make people realise that, as I said at the beginning, that the whole kind of no deal Brexit, I think almost, as I said, we kind of did have that for music in many ways. We've never really talked about it in those terms, and to think that it is a very inadequate situation. Yes, the music industry hasn't fallen down; it still is making generating a lot of money to the economy, but we can't kind of rest on our laurels in that sense, and it's particularly challenging internationally for the music industry at the moment. And lots of other countries are really investing in their music industries across the world in perhaps a way that the UK isn't. And so whilst we're still kind of hanging on the coattails of past successes, we really can't bank on that in the future. And I think as if we become increasingly sort of irrelevant in some of those discussions outside of to the European market, for example. So I think the networks that you have, contacting MPs, the campaigns that you're running, either via the European movement or otherwise, and then I guess more broadly, I guess in terms of social media, don't want to sound sort of glib about it, but I think it keeps. I think when we do initiatives like today, when we've done a letter to political leaders in Europe and the UK, making sure that more people see that and why this is important. And yeah, I don't, just because the music industry hasn't fallen over doesn't mean there isn't a challenge here. And yeah, I think it's how we sometimes straddle that issue, that slight tightrope of celebrating success as an industry, but also then recognizing when the challenges are. And I think we're definitely in that situation where there is a big, huge challenge here, and we need to get it right.
Thank you. Jackie has got a question for you.
Thanks very much, Gareth. Really interesting presentation. I work in Welsh Government at the moment, and I just would be really interested to hear if there's other stuff that Wales could be doing. Now, you mentioned, I wanted to ask two questions. One is, you mentioned the Soft Power Council. I've actually never heard of that, and I wondered if you have any more information about that. I'm happy to have it on email. And secondly, the immigration white paper that was published this week, I wonder if it intersects with any of your members, and the effect, or negative, positive, whatever it might have on not just people going over there, but coming over here and helping within the industry as well, because it's not just musicians, it's the whole industry.
Yeah,
that you represent. Thank you.
That's absolutely right. I mean, we haven't done an in-depth analysis of the immigration proposals as yet, but I mean, you're right, and particularly we do the nature of events and festivals, and the people who coming from overseas and working, there is a lot of that happens, which could have challenges in that area. And I think in the run-up to Brexit as well, there was lots of work that with what the Migration Advisory Council did at the time, where we gave them quite a bit of evidence in terms of that, the international complexity of not just the performance or the music industry business people, but people who supporting roles who are really integral and hugely important, about the risk of putting too tight to controls on that. So again, we have, just because of bandwidth and focusing on X number of issues, we haven't done an official statement on the immigration proposals, but we are sort of working on it and analysing. On soft power, yes, Soft Power Council is a new development. It was set up beginning of the year. It's I mean, actually, that was one of the things that came up in the meeting, and the council has got about 30 or 40 people on it, which has British Council and others on it too. But when we came to Wales, obviously the question was asked, well, why doesn't Wales have a seat on the council? Which is a very fair question. It's quite a centralised grouping of individuals. So when the UK government does these sort of things, how can it? It's not just a case of going over to Wales and having a one-off meeting in Wales. It kind of needs to have that kind of continuity to it too. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to send you some stuff, or there is some
Please,
material
would you
about
mind?
it online. Yeah,
That would be really helpful. Thank you. I'll put my email address in the chat if that's okay. Thank you.
sure. Thank you.
I mean, you're London-based, as you said, and obviously you go around the UK. Do you have a local contact that would
Well,
be
actually,
used?
his role isn't. I guess in more informal networks, I guess we have within Cardiff and in the kind of political level. But actually, my director of education and skills actually lives in Aberystwyth. He's he did live in London, then the pandemic hit, and then he moved back to Aberystwyth and's never come back. I mean, he's on the road quite a lot, but we do have a member of staff who does actually live in Wales. Who, but I mean, his role isn't to connect with the Cardiff institutions, but we do have some networks there already.
What networks would you like to develop further?
I think both political and, like you say, like a time of potential change. I guess like we're in that pre-election period, as was mentioned earlier by Jonathan. And I think that's a really important time, because often everything sort of resettles. Everything's kind of gearing up to this moment and having those elections in 12 months' time. So I think primarily from our perspective at the moment, we would probably want to prioritise developing relationships to help influence that debate that will probably come up. And I think because obviously that's going to have a big impact in terms of what's to come.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any? Yes, Jonathan's got another question.
Just a very quick question, and apologies if I missed this on your slide. You talked a bit about elected representatives. I just wondered whether you had links with the House of Lords. I was just thinking, because I was thinking of someone who I would have thought would have been involved in this, Kevin Brennan, former Cardiff West MP and a musician, of course. And he's been elevated, and it just struck me there must be other quite interesting, influential people that know the way around Westminster and might be able to help.
No, definitely. I mean, Kevin used to be the chair of our all-party parliamentary group on music, and he's been a great supporter of ours. And I think him coming to the Lords is a great addition for us. I mean, we do work with the House of Lords on lots of issues. There are particular. I mentioned things like AI and copyright, which is a big issue for us at the moment as well. There's a lot of sort of specialists in that area. I mean, also another thing about the House of Lords, they've got a lot of people who have kind of made their career, a lot of them in Europe as well, and have really good connections. Not necessarily just on the kind of commission level, but also more broader than that as well. So I think you're right. You kind of ignore the House of Lords at its peril in a way that there's some very influential people there, but also people who can sort of help support, and the kind of level of debate there is incredibly strong. And so it's totally agree basically.
Thank you very much. Anybody else got any questions? Well, can I just say that European Movement and Wales for Europe have had this campaign going on. It'll still be ongoing. What happens, of course, is that something else comes up. This campaign is going to be on the environment, which again is one of the 10 things that EM has isolated as being of particular interest. So we want you to keep in touch, please. And if you have designated people and organisations in Wales, please let us know. Because apart from political things, we are interested as people and individuals in music and culture as a whole. And of course, the economic aspect is important, but for us, it's a big, important part of our culture. So can I thank you, unless there are more questions, and very much we appreciate it. I'm sorry the audience has been small.
That's all right.
It will be on YouTube, and we will share it with our colleagues in EM and elsewhere. And thank you very much for giving me your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.